Hi everybody, Dr. Ben Edwards here at Veritas. I've got Nicole and Angie with me tonight. They're answering questions, so if y'all have any questions tonight, be sure to type them in the comments section and we'll try to answer those. We've got a new venue here. This is my office. We had such technical difficulties last month that, again, I apologize for those. We thought we'd give this a little test run and see how things go from my office. And we're still working on our new office, but ultimately that'll be where we'll hopefully be doing these pretty soon. So tonight I'm just going to go through a couple of articles that came out recently. There's some things in the news that people are talking about that I think there needs to be the other side of the story told. So we're all about informed consent here, and informed consent means the doctor needs to tell you all the information, the pros and the cons, and then you make a decision. I had a patient just today, beautiful little 3-year-old boy, and his mother and grandmother brought him in, and they were informed patients. And they're new patients, and I love these new patients that come in already informed. And so I was real proud of them for taking charge of their own health, and specifically this little baby. He had a rough delivery, but survived delivery. It was kind of a miracle, surviving delivery. But then at 5 weeks old, developed a severe rash, a horrible eczema type rash. And of course, the doctors had trouble managing all that inflammation, and eventually with steroids by mouth. So he battled this for 4 or 5 months and did lots of steroids to try to calm the inflammation down, and eventually did calm the inflammation down. And then mom and grandma, who are very much inclined towards more natural medicine, started doing a lot of research and trying to figure out what's the root cause of this. I don't want to just treat it with steroids. I want to fix what's actually triggering the inflammation. So they did, and they went on to eliminate certain pro-inflammatory foods. They started to try to heal his gut. But the point I'm getting at is these folks were informed, became more and more informed as they got educated, and the pediatricians were recommending they be sure to vaccinate this little baby. And mom and grandma had gotten so informed, they read the study that showed African American babies, boys in particular, were about a 300% increased risk of vaccine injury, specifically autism, if they followed the routine vaccine schedule with the MMR vaccine as opposed to delaying it. The study was out of Atlanta, Georgia, conducted by the CDC. We've talked about this study before. Those statistics were manipulated and buried, and basically a whistleblower at the CDC, one of the lead scientists on this study, actually saved the raw data, invoked the whistleblower clause, and he produced that data to prove this increased risk. And his point was these African American boys who got vaccinated on the routine schedule had a higher risk of autism. The ones that delayed the schedule a little bit had less risk, a 300% less risk. So this mama knew this because she was informed. And so she used that information to make a decision to not vaccinate that baby on the routine schedule. On top of that, she knew if a baby had a chronic illness or a chronic inflammatory state or an autoimmune condition, leaky gut, that there had even more increased risk of vaccine injury. So again, my point here is an informed mom and informed grandmother protected this little baby and delayed the vaccine schedule. And this is all based in science, all based in evidence, but not all doctors know this. Not all doctors know about that study from the CDC. The whistleblower had to invoke the Whistleblower Act to get the data revealed. Doctors are busy seeing patients, mostly too many patients every day, and so they don't have time to dig into the literature if it's not on the front page of some newspaper or some journal article. You have to really dig. So we're here to inform you tonight. So this presentation is to educate you, and so you can be an informed consumer, an informed patient, and take charge of your health. So we are going to talk about flu vaccination tonight, because what you're going to start to hear is get your flu shot, because the flu shot is the most effective way to avoid the flu. And that's kind of the sales pitch. So that's what I have an issue with. Maybe I won't say I have an issue with. What I'm going to say is has published, and the Cochrane Review Board is an unbiased group of medical researchers.
Let me try this. They're still, I think that's the opposite ear. They're still having trouble hearing you. Maybe if you put both of them in.
Again. All right. Well, let me know how I sound now.
Did you hear a beep when you put them in?
I heard it just go. Okay. So the Cochrane Review published some studies that shows the flu vaccination has been pretty ineffective over the past many years. So we'll go over those tonight, because you need to be informed, and then you can decide what's my risk, what's my benefit, do I want to do it, and you don't have to succumb to just marketing and advertising and fear-based medicine. But before we get to that, I have to do this, because this study, I just saw this come across my desk late last week from the journal Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology. We'll have it there on the screen for you. So this is a journal obviously based on clinical pharmacology, and what they do is study various topics. The one I'm going to pull up here is regarding statins, and the reason the headline was so grabbing, I mean, here it is here. LDL cholesterol, that's what LDLC stands for. LDLC does not cause cardiovascular disease. That's the name of the article. So it's telling you right here, your LDL cholesterol that you're trying to lower so much with your statin drug, and your doctor's probably really freaked out about your LDL and your total cholesterol. And this is a great review study that says don't worry about it, because it doesn't cause cardiovascular disease. At least it hasn't been proven as such. And I want to read a little bit from this introduction because it's just so powerful. For a half a century, can they hear me now? Did they say?
I said it's better.
Okay. So for half a century, high levels of total cholesterol and low LDL, low density lipoprotein, that's LDL, has been considered to be the major cause of atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease. And statin treatment has been widely promoted for cardiovascular prevention. However, there's an increasing understanding that the mechanisms are far more complicated, and that statin treatment in particular, when used as primary prevention, is of doubtful benefit. They went on to say, the authors of 3 large reviews recently published by statin advocates have attempted to validate the current dogma. So what this is saying is there were 3 studies that came out in reputable journals that attempted to validate this thought that total cholesterol and LDL cause cardiovascular disease. This paper that I'm reading from delineates the serious errors in these 3 reviews, as well as other obvious falsifications of the cholesterol hypothesis. Our search for falsifications of the cholesterol hypothesis confirms that it is unable to satisfy any of the Bradford Hill criteria for causality, and that the conclusions of the authors of the 3 reviews are based on misleading statistics, exclusion of unsuccessful trials, and by ignoring numerous contradictory observations. So, this article, which I want y'all to see it in case you want to go look it up yourself, from the Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology, and the title of the article there, LDL cholesterol, that's what the C stands for, does not cause cardiovascular disease. This is from January of 2018. That's when it was received. It was accepted August 31st of 2018, and then posted online September 10th of 2018. And what these guys are accusing, basically, or proving through their search of the data, is they looked at these studies that said that advocated for statin use and that cholesterol and LDL caused heart disease, and they just said that the authors of these studies were biased. They used misleading statistics. They excluded trials that did not go along with their hypothesis. and they ignored trials that absolutely contraindicated their hypothesis. So my point is, everyone's biased. I say this all the time. I'm biased, everyone's biased. But this particular study goes in depth and goes through dozens of studies that contradict the current dogma that total cholesterol and LDL cause heart disease. And so I'm not going to go through the dozens of studies because the point I'm trying to make is people are biased. Certain studies are published. You may hear about them on the news. Certain studies aren't published, and you're not going to hear about them on the news. Almost guaranteed there's not a pediatrician in West Texas probably that heard about the CDC whistleblower data, because it just wasn't widely made known. It wasn't widely published. It wasn't on the nightly news, or the American Journal of Pediatrics did have to retract their original story that said there was no link between MMR and autism, but that retraction was in very small print, I think, on the back page. So with that kind of introduction, we've got to go on to some of these flu studies. So, like I said, you're going to be hearing more and more and more on the commercials from the hospitals, from the pharmacies, maybe from others, that the flu vaccine is the most effective way to avoid the flu. So let's go to the stats. Here's the Cochrane. They hear me still? Mm-hmm. Okay. The Cochrane Review, which, like I said, it's a global network, independent network of researchers in more than 130 countries who strive to produce credible, accessible health information that is free from commercial sponsorship and other conflicts. So the Cochrane Review Board is a bunch of scientists and doctors who look at medical research in an unbiased manner and just tell you what it says. And even conventional doctors look at the Cochrane as kind of the gold standard. So Cochrane has looked at influenza vaccination studies multiple times. Here's their latest. February 1st, 2018, the Cochrane Group released its latest findings on the flu vaccine. And these scientists studied randomized controlled trials. So that's good. That's considered a gold standard also. Comparing the flu vaccine with placebo or no intervention at all. So when they looked at all the studies that they could find between 1969 and 2009 that fit the criteria of randomized controlled trials, they found 52 clinical trials with over 80,000 people. So that's a good review. Summarizing 52 trials that included 80,000 people over a 40-year period of time, that's a pretty darn good review. And here's what they found. The flu vaccine probably reduces influenza in healthy adults from 2.3% of that 80,000 would get the flu if they did not have the vaccine, versus 0.9% who would get the flu if they got the vaccine. So here's take-home message number one. 2.3% out of 80,000 people, that's a real small number of people to get flu. But the difference between the people vaccinated and unvaccinated was 1.4%. So another way to say that is 98.6% of the time, as Dr. Brownstein says, the flu shot fails. If the flu shot were perfect, then 100% of people would not have gotten the flu. And that's not the case. So you can get the flu shot and get the flu. You cannot get the flu shot and get the flu. And the difference is 1.4%. Another way to look at that statistic is it takes 71 people to get the flu shot to avoid one case of flu, for one person not to get the flu. And then again, as Dr. Brownstein says, you divide 71 into 72, and that's 99% of the time it is a failure rate. And I don't really want to get that inflammatory about it. Again, my point is, if 1.4% is the best way to prevent the flu, that's not very good. 1.4% is pretty lousy. So when you hear the commercials to please get the flu shot, it's the best way to avoid the flu, I kind of cringe, because what I know people are thinking is, wow, it's going to work great. It's the best way to prevent it. So I'll just go get my shot and then keep living my stressful life, eating plenty of sugar and grain, taking antibiotics too often, mostly for viral illnesses, which what all that does, grain, sugar, stress, antibiotics, it kills your immune system. And so my contention would be the best way to prevent the flu would be to improve your native immunity. You have an immune system that's designed to identify these bugs and kill them. And boosting that ability to do that, your God-given ability to fight these germs, in my opinion, is going to be better than a 1.4% odds of avoiding the flu. And in fact, we'll go on to this. Dr. Mercola had a great article. I think this was, let me get to the top. The Big Bad Flu Data. What you need to know about vaccine effectiveness and alternatives. So this was from March 13th of 2018. I'm not going to go through this whole article, although it is fascinating. The part I want to get to that no one ever talks about is down here. You probably never heard this word. Heterologous immunity. What he goes on to explain here is it appears, because a study came out in 2010, it talks about it here, I'll just highlight it. 2010, a Canadian study that found people who were vaccinated against seasonal flu were more susceptible to the pandemic H1N1 strain. So what this is saying is they got a flu shot just for your regular old seasonal flu, which did not contain the H1N1 strain. The people that got that flu shot for seasonal flu were more likely to get H1N1. So that was an interesting study in 2010 out of Canada. And then this next study in 2014, the ferret study came out and basically replicated that same data. And then a study in 2012 out of China showed the same thing. They found that here's the 2012 Chinese study, found that a child's chance of contracting a respiratory infection after getting the seasonal flu shot rose more than 4-fold. So this is some interesting stuff in this paragraph here by Angelatoni. But he went on to summarize these studies. So 2010 Canadian study, a 2014 ferret study, and the 2012 Chinese study are all saying the same thing, is it looks like if you get a seasonal flu shot, you're increasing your risk of other viral respiratory infections. And so that's what we got to remember, is that there's many hundreds of other viral infections that can act just like the flu, give you high fever, a cough, runny nose, body aches, chills, and make you sick for a week. And what these three studies are pointing out is people that get the flu shot to try to protect themselves against the 3 flu strains that are in the flu shot are more susceptible to all these other bugs. And so this theory they've come up with, it's called unequal immunity or heterologous immunity. Basically, it's saying it looks like the flu shot is causing the immune system to focus only on these 3 viruses that are in the flu shot. It's almost like you're in a war somewhere and you've got a perimeter, you've got a guard, and someone just gave you some secret intel that the enemy was only over your west wall. So all the troops run over to the west wall and they're ready for the enemy coming over that wall. But now your northeast and south wall are totally uncovered. And oops, we got enemies coming in our blind side. So that's what these guys are saying. It looks like the flu shot gets your immune system focused on those 3 strains of flu, and you're more susceptible now to all these other bugs that are out there every winter. And what they said was this needs to be explored more. So that's part of informed consent. Before you get a flu shot, the nurse or the doctor needs to inform you of these 3 studies that show you're going to be at increased risk for other viral respiratory infections. For more details on that, read Dr. Mercola's great article. Other highlights of his article, I mentioned the Cochrane Review in 2018 in February basically said 1.4% decreased risk of flu with the flu shot. But there was also a meta-analysis that the Cochrane Review Board did in 2014, and they came away with that same conclusion, but they had some more things to say. They looked harder at the studies between, let me find it, here we go. This actually in 2015. CDC analysis revealed that between 2005 and 2015, the flu vaccine was less than 50% effective more than half the time. So basically that's going to tell you, for example, last year the data came out, the 2017 flu shot was effective 36% of the time. So 36% of the people who got the flu vaccine could have had some benefit, 64% didn't. When they look back at 2005 to 2015 overall, it was less than 50% most of the time. So again, you need to be informed of that. It's a 50-50 chance at best, but usually it's even less than 50-50 chance. The second thing that's touted, the flu shot, if you get the flu shot and then you contract the flu, it will lessen the severity of your symptoms. So here we go, the CDC study. I'll highlight it. Wait a minute, wrong highlight. Oh, here we go, right there. Does vaccination really lessen flu symptoms? And what it says, after adjusting by age group, virus subtype, and season, the difference remains statistically significant only for headache, which was less frequent among vaccinated individuals. So what that study, the final conclusion was, for those who got a flu shot and ended up getting the flu, they had a little bit less headache. It did not make them cough less. It did not make them have less fever. It did not decrease the number of days they were sick. It did not decrease their chills, their aches, their anything else. But it did improve a little bit the amount of headache that the patients reported. Further on in that study, I'm not going to waste your time trying to find it. It talks about hospitalizations. I think I made a note of that. Because that's the other big kind of sales pitch, is it'll decrease your risk of hospitalization. And this study showed, yes, it did. It reduced hospitalizations in people that were not vaccinated who got the flu. 14.7% ended up in the hospital. For the group that was vaccinated, 14.1% ended up in the hospital. So it reduced risk of hospitalization by 0.6%. Now, some people might say, well, 1.4% is better than nothing, and 0.6% is better than nothing. But we haven't even talked about the potential side effects, which are numerous. Well, I guess we did talk about one. You increase your risk of contracting other flu-like viruses, other respiratory viruses. So really, when you start to analyze this from a non-biased, unbiased perspective, like Cochrane Review has, you come walking away with it thinking, man, this just really isn't that good of a deal. And that's what Cochrane consistently has said over and over, is we're spending a lot of money, doing a lot of shots, a lot of potential side effect exposure, and potentially increasing your risk of other viruses for what? A little bit of decreased headache and a 1.4% decreased risk of getting the flu. So those are just some facts, some numbers, some unbiased data that you need to know, because probably what you're going to get inundated with is this is the best way to prevent flu. And again, I would say 1.4% is just not a very good statistic. So what do you do to prevent flu? The same thing you do to prevent everything else Americans are wrestling with and battling with right now. This little boy I saw today, the 3-year-old who had horrible eczema. 50% of kids today have a chronic disease like eczema, asthma, and learning disorders and obesity. And half the kids are sick. I'm not going to go into all the stats like I do every first Tuesday talk. Go back and listen to my other ones. But I tell folks we need to get back to doing things like we used to do. Used to, flu shots weren't even recommended except for the very young and the very old, the ones who had compromised immune systems. So that just, again, points to the fact we need to boost our immune system. But what were we doing 100 years ago, 200 years ago, before there was much heart attack, cancer, autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis and autism and ADD and ADHD? Number one thing, the food that goes in your mouth. Let thy food be thy medicine is what Hippocrates said. You've got to eat food that's going to improve your immune system. That is found primarily by avoiding sugar. A high sugar diet is going to decrease your white blood cell function. Your white blood cells get sluggish and basically go offline when you consume a lot of sugar. And sugars in everything, and ketchup and mayonnaise and potato chips and definitely stuff like Coke and sweets. But so eat real food, eat plenty of color, eat high fat, moderate protein, low carb, also known as ketogenic, paleo, ancestral diet. I think I'm going to coin a new phrase called the SAD diet. Everyone knows the standard American diet. It's the most deadly diet known to man, but the healthiest, most beneficial diet known to man is another SAD diet. I call it SAD diet, the standard ancestral diet. And that's all we're saying is get back to eating like your great-grandparents did. Back when everyone ate grass-fed, free-range, cage-free, antibiotic, hormone-free, organic, vine-ripened, all the catchphrases for healthy food. That's what human beings have always eaten until the last 60 years or 70 years or so. So just get back to that. That's number one. Number two, you've got to start saying no to stuff. You've got to bring your stress level down. We're overtaxed, overworked, stressed, running in 50 million different directions. So bring your stress down. Stress shuts the immune system down. I was explaining to that mama today that little baby was so stressed during delivery because he had the cord wrapped around his neck 3 times plus a knot in the cord, and he had major fetal distress in the womb. And so he came out in fight or flight mode. And when you're in fight or flight mode, your body's trying to survive. It's trying to run away from that bear or kill the bear. So it shuts your immune system down, and it shuts your GI tract down, your gastrointestinal tract, your digestive system, because it doesn't care about digesting your last meal or fighting off a cold. It cares about running away from that tiger or killing the tiger. So his immune system, he came out compromised because he was in fight or flight mode, and he was cesarean. And cesarean babies don't get the good probiotics from their mama's vaginal birth canal. Cesarean babies get their probiotics from the skin of the hospital workers who scooped them up and took them to the incubator. Studies show this. It's the bugs in the gut that talk to your immune system. 80% immune system sits inside your gut wall, inside your intestinal wall is your immune system. And the bugs inside your intestine talk to the immune system. So you need to nourish your bugs. If you want to have a good immune system, nourish your probiotic flora, meaning eat real food. Don't eat food in a package that's full of preservatives and antibiotics and hormones and chemicals and stuff that's not going to feed your food or feed your probiotics. Prebiotic type food, that's fiber. Again, eat your food. Eat your veggies, but not just the veggies. Bone broth is a great source of fiber. The collagen that's in bone broth is fiber. And that's what our ancestors used to do. They'd eat the whole cow. They'd eat the organ meats. That's where the copper's at. That's where the minerals are at. Copper runs your immune system enzymes. They would take the bones and make a stew and make a broth and eat off that for days, and that's got the collagen. So there's lots of fiber that feeds your good bacteria and the collagen too. Just so many nutrients in an ancestral traditional diet. So if you want to avoid the flu this year, my recommendation would be to eat more ancestral and occasionally fast, meaning just don't eat. That also improves your immune function. Definitely stay off the sugar. If you want to do some extra immune boosting kind of supplements, that's fine. That's great. I love the minerals in particular. If you're remineralized appropriately, your immune system enzymes, along with all your other enzymes, will work right. So copper and magnesium are the 2 big ones, but copper you need to get it from food. That would be organ meats or whole food vitamin C. You can get that in supplemental form also. But then there's special things, the mushroom extracts, the beta-glucans that are found in mushrooms, that can bolster immunity. Some people talk about vitamin D. And I understand that. There are some studies. Dr. Mercola's real big on vitamin D. There's some studies that show, I think it was 33% reduction in flu with just vitamin D supplementation. I'm much more into the whole food vitamin D. I'm sorry, I said C. Vitamin D supplementation. That's found in cod liver oil. And get some sunshine. I think the vitamin D that your body makes is more beneficial than what you can take in a pill. I'm not all the way over, probably hardcore enough to say don't take any vitamin D in the winter, as some practitioners would be. I'm not going to take a man-made synthetic form of vitamin D this winter. I'm going to take cod liver oil, and I'm going to continue to get sunshine. I'm going to have my minerals balanced so that I can make my own vitamin D. But there is some data out there that suggests just taking vitamin D supplements is better than the flu shot. Vitamin C, of course, old try and true vitamin C, echinacea, elderberry. If you get the flu, there's some great homeopathic remedies. Virucid is a combination of different herbs and vitamins by Orthomolecular that works great. Of course, ozone and the UV light that we have here helps bolster your immune system greatly, which is ultimately what's going to kill viruses. So, but the biggest thing is prepare for the flu now by eating right. There's another article. I just saw it this afternoon. I glanced at it briefly, so I don't have the details, so I almost didn't want to mention it. But it was about a kid. I call him a kid. He's 28. I'm getting old now, so I can call a 28-year-old a kid. In London, somewhere in Great Britain, diagnosed with dementia. And I thought, man. And the headline was, earliest diagnosed dementia ever. And again, I don't know the details, so I might be misspeaking here some, but the point is, dementia at 28, type 2 diabetes in a 7-year-old. I mean, all these adult, old people, chronic disease that we used to not see until people were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, we're seeing in the 20s and in the teens. And it's crazy, and you don't need to succumb and be one of those statistics. I felt bad for that mama and grandma today of the 3-year-old boy because they had been browbeaten by their doctors, and they had been fear-mongered. They had been made to feel like they were inadequate parents and grandparents. They were made to feel like they were putting their son at risk. These ladies were in tears, and they were just trying to protect their son and grandson. And they were educated, and they were informed, and they said people kind of make fun of them for doing alternative stuff. And so I was quick to encourage them. And I was quick to point out that the American healthcare system produces the worst outcomes. So if we're in a system that's getting the worst results, who wouldn't want an alternative to that? And again, I've gone through all these stats before, so I won't bore you, but just to remind you, we are the worst health outcomes, from infant mortality to maternal mortality to chronic disease, so obesity and diabetes and longevity, life expectancy. I mean, you name it, go down the board. We're the sickest, although we spend the most money. So we do need an alternative to this. What's an alternative to the flu shot? Again, if you get informed and you decide that that it would be beneficial for you to take that, and the 1.4% benefit that the Cochrane Review Board states you would receive, that's great. But we're here to educate and to inform so you can make the informed decision like the mom and grandma did for that little boy. I'm happy to say the little boy, now 3 years old, is healthy as he can be. We tend to see 3-year-old kids here. Usually kids come here when they're super sick, have tons of ear infections, horrible asthma, eczema, all kinds of different learning disabilities. So he was a shining example because he was 3 years old now and totally healthy. He hadn't had an ear infection. He had strep throat. He rarely gets a cold. He was a beautiful, beaming, happy, intelligent, talkative, great young boy. And I told his mom that the chances of him being this healthy, if they had pursued the traditional route only, which they did initially to bring the inflammation down, and that's where I always say, put the fire out if you need to with symptomatic treatment and pharmaceuticals, but then go deeper and get to the root cause and fix it. And that's what they did. Otherwise, your standard American kid's going to stay on the steroid. Steroid is going to compromise the immune system even more. They would stay on a standard American diet, probably lots of processed stuff and sugar and grain. So that a normal standard American kid with that bad of eczema at 5 weeks old would turn into multiple ear infections, multiple rounds of antibiotics, multiple strep throats, probably chronic sinus and allergy. Asthma was highly likely. In fact, the hospital in Denver told this mom at 5 weeks old, because of this eczema, said, watch this kid, he's going to get asthma. And the kid doesn't have asthma, and the mom was asking me what I thought about that. Was he at risk for asthma? And I said, well, yeah, he's going to be at more increased risk because of that history. But that doctor in Denver was speaking from a standard American mindset, and the standard American patient who's going to eat horribly, be stressed out, sit and watch video games all day, not move, not oxygenate, and those kids end up chronically sick, and this kid wasn't. So bravo to that mom and that grandma, and for them getting informed, taking charge of their own health, and having a beautiful, healthy 3-year-old boy now. So again, that's our point of our lecture tonight, is to inform you fully and to make you aware that a lot of the information you're going to hear on commercial, radio and TV, and print is potentially biased. Let me maybe leave with this. I hope y'all can still hear me. I showed this last time, but I think it's worth showing again. This is a quote from Dr. Richard Horton, editor-in-chief of The Lancet, the world's most respected medical journal. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue, afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analysis, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance. Science has taken a turn towards darkness. That was editor-in-chief of Lancet. This, Marcia Angel. It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of the trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reach slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Those are 2 pretty big journals and 2 pretty big names, and they're basically just saying, guys, be careful. There's biases out there. And those biases can influence your doctor, and can influence the commercials, and can influence you. I'm not going to leave it with that. I got one more. Sorry, then I'll leave it. Here's one. We talked about this last year. Let me look real quick, just so y'all can go look this up. On veritasmedical.com, go down to First Tuesdays. There's a scroll around, and here's one First Tuesday talk called How Drugs Work and Sometimes Don't. There it is. In that talk, I go into the study on Tamiflu, and this Dr. Ben Goldberg, there's a TED talk he does it. I think I played it during the presentation that night, where he talks about publication bias. And I define that here. There we go. So the same Cochrane Review Board, the gold standard for evidence-based medicine, they couldn't even get the studies on Tamiflu. And they had to use, it was a 4-year effort. Highlight that right here. A 4-year effort, including a Freedom of Information lawsuit, so the researchers were able to assess the documents. And they got 160,000 pages finally to look at how Tamiflu worked. And their conclusion, the evidence does not support claims, because the drug company was making claims, that these drugs, like Tamiflu and other antivirals, lower the risk of complications from the flu, such as pneumonia, or that the benefits outweigh the risk. I'm pretty sure I haven't heard that on the news or the Tamiflu commercials. That the independent Cochrane Review Board concluded after filing the lawsuit to get to the data, because what happened was these studies were conducted. They turned out it showed Tamiflu didn't help. So the people that did these studies put them in the filing cabinet. They didn't put it in the newspaper, in the journals, and the nightly news. We didn't know about it. They didn't publish them. So this is what's called publication bias. Dr. Ben Goldberg, TED Talk, really goes into it more. But that's just another piece of this whole scheme, is that we've got to be careful even when you see a study on the nightly news, who funded it, who produced it, who interpreted the data, where are all the other studies that maybe contradict it. And that's what I was talking about in the top of the show tonight with the cholesterol studies. That pharmacology journal went back and actually identified where there was a total bias and the data was manipulated. Same thing happened at the CDC with the MMR vaccine. So unfortunately, that's the world we live in. That's what the journal editor of The Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine both concluded. That's what Ben Goldberg has concluded. It's the obvious conclusion. For those who have time to really look into it, which unfortunately your doctor probably doesn't, because if he did, he'd come to the same obvious factual conclusion. There's more to the story. So, continue to get informed. If you're new to First Tuesday Talk here at Veritas, please go back and listen to all the other First Tuesday Talks, because we do these. I have 6 kids at home I could be playing with right now. But I'm committed to spending this time on Tuesday nights, the first of every month, to help try to bring more truth. And I'm not saying I have all the truth. And I'm admittedly biased. And my bias is that God created us. We weren't evolved out of pond scum. And God's amazing engineering in the body is so fascinatingly intricate and detailed and exquisite. We will never understand it all. I mean, I need to do a talk on quantum physics. I want to do a talk on quantum physics, quantum medicine. I've kind of touched on in the past a little bit, but this is beyond me. I'm not a quantum physicist, so I'm trying to study it more, to learn it more. But all it's proving to me, and what it's proven to the quantum physicists, this is the beauty of it, is these quantum guys, they are so smart. It's pointing them right back to a creator. They're right back to intelligent design. They're right back to God. So I think we're scratching the surface on our understanding of this physical body and the emotional and spiritual body, and we don't fully understand it. We learn a little bit, and then we make a whole lot of assumptions, and we throw a lot of stuff in the mix, and a lot of times it's a pharmaceutical, chemical-based stuff, and we don't have the first clue about how even the immune system works. So continue to watch some of these videos. Go back in the archives and watch them. Listen to the radio shows. I have a fascinating one. I've got to end this because I got to go pick up one of the 6 kiddos from ballet. But I'll leave it with this, I promise. Be listening for Dr. Thomas Cowan. Here's his newest book. He sent me one of the first copies so I could read it and interview him on the radio, and I did. But we recorded the interview. It's not up yet. So we'll be playing that shortly in the coming weeks, I think. But he talks about these childhood illnesses and vaccines and autoimmune disease like eczema. Fascinating look at the immune system and how the immune system actually needs to see these bugs like measles and chickenpox and even the flu. And when your body's first responders fire off their immune response and cause you to have a fever and snot and diarrhea and achy, that's actually good for you. It's good for your secondary immune system, which is called the humoral immune system. That's your memory cells. So part of your immune system is there for the long haul, for the long-term memory. But your memory cells need the first responders to first fire off, and you actually need to have those symptoms to make the immune system fully functional and fully robust. Now I'm going to go ahead and give you a sneak preview. He quoted some studies that aren't on this page. I'm just going to tell you, based off memory, I believe this study said a 20% reduced risk of glioblastoma, of brain cancer, for patients who acquired measles naturally. There's another study that showed a decreased risk of coronary artery disease for patients that acquired chickenpox naturally. So when you get these bugs early in life and your immune system has to respond and mount that immune response, it's doing something to your immune system that's beneficial for the long haul to avoid cancer and heart disease, our top two killers. So it's a fascinating book. It's a fascinating interview. Be looking for that in the future. But our whole point is we're here to educate you and bring you some of these other thoughts that you're not going to hear in your everyday conversations with your conventionally minded healthcare practitioners and friends and radio shows and newspapers and nightly news. Maybe someday they'll invite me on the nightly news and we can give another perspective. But until then, keep watching First Tuesday Talks right here at Veritas. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate y'all, and we'll try to do this again. Hopefully this turned out good. Hopefully you heard me. We can do this again next month. Bye.